Hello everyone, welcome to Hopeful Moments 1. Today, we will be sharing a story about a manager who had to deal with an irresponsible employee and an ineffective HR system, which ultimately led to a decision to resign in order to protect their career. Today's story will take you through a surprising situation. The story is full of ironic twists and reflects the absurdity in the workplace when employees know how to exploit the system, yet still can't avoid the consequences. If you find this story interesting and full of meaningful lessons, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more valuable insights. Previously, I held the position of Sales Operations Director at a software company with an annual revenue of $40 million. With such scale, the operations team was not just a support group, but a core part of ensuring revenue flow and optimizing business performance. In my role, I was responsible for overseeing all commercial operational processes, from managing the order processing system, improving internal logistics, to optimizing approval times and transactions. One of my most important tasks was ensuring that all purchase orders were processed quickly, accurately, and without disruption to the business operations. A small mistake in the operations could lead to significant consequences, affecting sales and customer experience. In my team, Karen was an important member, directly responsible for order processing, a critical link in the internal supply chain. Her job required precision, speed, and accuracy because even a minor error could delay an order, impacting both customers and revenue. In addition, Karen didn't just handle data, she also worked closely with other departments such as sales, finance, and logistics to ensure smooth transactions. Thanks to the efforts of the sales operations team, including dedicated individuals like Karen, the company was able to maintain an efficient operation system that supported sustainable development and competitiveness in the market. However, an unexpected incident occurred, directly affecting Karen and indirectly impacting my entire team. One morning, on her way to work, she was involved in a minor car accident. While it was not life-threatening, the collision caused neck injuries, requiring her to wear a brace for several weeks to fully recover. The doctors also recommended that Karen attend weekly physical therapy sessions and avoid strenuous activities, especially those that could put pressure on her neck and shoulders. This meant that her ability to work was significantly affected. The tasks that Karen had been handling, especially those requiring high concentration and fast processing speeds, became challenging. Additionally, she would need to be absent for several days each week for therapy, disrupting the workflow of the team. As a manager, I completely understood and empathized with her situation. I believe that employee health should always be a top priority, and a leader's responsibility is not only to optimize performance but also to create a safe and flexible working environment. Therefore, I immediately adjusted her tasks and schedule to accommodate her health condition. I reduced her workload, rearranged tasks so that she could focus on less pressure-filled parts of her job, and allowed flexibility for her to take time off for therapy without stressing over time or work. Not only that, I also encouraged the team to support Karen during this period. We shared the workload, ensuring that the overall progress was not affected while helping Karen feel like an important part of the team. I regularly checked on her health and recovery progress, adjusted her workload as needed, and kept the team motivated by creating a supportive and understanding work environment. This incident taught me a valuable lesson about the importance of flexibility in human resources management. A good leader doesn't only evaluate performance based on work results but also by how they can support employees during difficult times, helping them return to work stronger and more effectively. However, in stark contrast to the flexibility and support the company provided, Karen seemed to view her job as more of an option than a responsibility. Initially, I thought she just needed more time to recover. However, strange signs began to appear. Karen repeatedly took time off without valid reasons, and not just once or twice. She often took 3 to 4 days off at a time, stretching over several weeks, causing the team significant difficulty in maintaining work progress. I began to notice the negative impact of this. My team members had to take on more of Karen's work, leading to overloading and imbalance within the team. Some people started asking, does Karen really need that much time off, or is she taking advantage of the flexibility the company offered her? Soon after, the HR department also noticed the issue and began investigating. They didn't immediately disclose all the details to me but expressed concern about the validity of the medical documents Karen had provided. From what I gathered, the documents were insufficient to justify all the extended time off she had taken. This raised a major question: did Karen really need more recovery time than originally anticipated, or was she deliberately taking advantage of the company's support policy? The contradiction between Karen's actual health condition and the way she was taking time off couldn't be overlooked. If Karen truly needed more time to recover, the company was willing to support her. But if she was exploiting the company's kindness and flexibility, it would not only impact team performance but also erode trust among colleagues. I realized that dealing with this situation wasn't just a personal issue between Karen and the company, but also a human resources management challenge. How could we resolve a case like this fairly, ensuring Karen's rights while maintaining fairness for the entire team? This was a question I knew I needed to find an answer to soon. Worse still, Karen completely failed to take responsibility for informing us about the days she would be absent. Instead of sending an email or notifying the team in advance so we could plan, she would suddenly take time off without any explanation. On many occasions, the team would only realize Karen was absent when she didn't show up for meetings or when we tried to contact her but received no response. What's more, sometimes she wouldn't even bother to make a phone call to report her absence, leaving us completely unprepared. This lack of responsibility not only caused difficulties for me but also severely affected the entire team. No one knew when Karen would be present or absent, making it impossible for us to plan and allocate work effectively. Orders that needed to be processed quickly were delayed because the person responsible was missing, and there was no advance notice to find a replacement. Other colleagues in the team had to take on additional work at the last minute, leading to overload, stress, and low morale. This disruption was particularly severe in my department, where accuracy and speed in order processing were key factors. When an order wasn't processed on time, it could trigger a chain of consequences, from late deliveries, customer complaints, to the risk of losing important contracts. I gradually realized that this was no longer just a personal issue with Karen, it had become a problem affecting the entire company's operational process. As a manager, I understand that flexibility cannot equate to irresponsibility. I knew I could no longer allow this situation to persist because, if left unresolved, it would set a bad precedent in the work culture. So, I began considering tougher measures to address the issue, but the question remained: how should I handle an employee abusing the company's sympathy, in a way that is both fair and maintains professionalism in the workplace? Initially, when the HR department decided to require Karen to attend work regularly or provide medical documentation for extended leave, I saw this as a completely reasonable and necessary decision. Not only did this demonstrate the company's seriousness in addressing the lack of transparency regarding Karen's absences, but it also reinforced an important principle in human resources management: flexibility must be accompanied by responsibility. Karen's unexcused absences and lack of organization were not only affecting her personal performance, but they also created a ripple effect on the entire team and company operations. Colleagues had to take on extra work, order processing was disrupted, and more importantly, this inconsistency created a sense of inequality within the organization. Other employees might start feeling resentful, asking themselves why they have to stick to a strict schedule while Karen can take time off at will without consequences. HR made a responsible decision by giving Karen two clear options: return to work regularly, following the company's policies, or provide official medical certification from a doctor to qualify for extended leave under short-term disability. This wasn't just a measure to control personnel, it was also a way to ensure fairness in the workplace. The company was willing to support employees when they faced health difficulties, but that did not mean anyone could abuse the flexible policy to avoid work responsibilities. This decision also sent a strong message: the company's support has limits, and it's only for those who truly need it, not for those who exploit it. As a manager, I completely agreed with this decision. I understand that humanitarian support and flexibility in management cannot be exploited to weaken the discipline of the organization. This was the time for Karen to prove whether she truly needed the company's support or if she was simply taking advantage of it. So, what path did Karen choose? Would she comply with the company's requirements or continue to find ways to shirk responsibility? This was a critical test, not only for Karen but also for the company's HR policies. For me, this decision was a reasonable and necessary solution. If Karen truly needed time to recover, it was best for her to provide official medical confirmation so I could hire a temporary employee as a replacement. This way, work would continue without disruption, and the team could work with a clear schedule rather than constantly dealing with her unpredictable absences. But what disappointed me even more was that Karen shamelessly exploited this policy. When the initial doctor refused to sign the extended leave certificate due to the lack of valid reasons, she should have seen this as a signal to adjust her behavior. However, instead of doing that, Karen found another doctor, one who was willing to sign the certificate without thoroughly examining her actual condition. This was no longer just a personal issue for Karen, it had become a serious ethical problem. This action not only showed dishonesty but also reflected an abuse of both the healthcare system and the company's policy. What's worse, Karen even bragged that she found a doctor who would sign anything, which sparked resentment within the team. Other colleagues began to feel the unfairness when one person could easily exploit the system without facing consequences, while they still had to work hard every day. Eventually, Karen started taking short-term disability leave, and although I knew she still participated in leisure activities like going to clubs and parties, I didn't feel the need to intervene at that moment because work was still running smoothly. But this raised a bigger issue. This policy was meant to help employees who genuinely needed support, but it was being exploited by people like Karen to benefit without working. So, the question is, what can I do to ensure that situations like Karen's do not continue to occur? However, my initial indifference and indecision about this issue were only temporary. At the time, the most important thing to me was that the work continued and was completed properly, despite the lack of transparency in Karen's actions. But gradually, I realized that turning a blind eye couldn't go on forever, as it not only affected productivity but also set a bad precedent within the company. The lack of control and loose policies in human resources were opening the door for people like Karen to exploit the system, creating an unfair and unsustainable working environment. Hardworking employees who truly contributed to the company's success were starting to feel resentful when they saw someone continually absent, neglecting their responsibilities, yet still holding onto their position and benefiting from the policies. This was a sign of a problem that could not continue if the company wanted to maintain fairness and efficiency in its operations. Things came to a head when Karen's short-term disability benefits came to an end. She now faced a difficult choice: return to work or apply for long-term disability benefits so she could leave the job permanently without being replaced. But the issue was, her signature anything doctor couldn't continue providing valid certificates. This forced Karen to return to the company, albeit reluctantly. However, instead of changing her work attitude, Karen continued to repeat her old habits. As soon as she returned, she frequently missed work without valid reasons, refused to perform the most basic tasks, and showed complete lack of commitment to the job. This was no longer a health issue but simply a deliberate attempt to avoid work without facing consequences. At this point, I understood that I could not continue to tolerate this situation. A department that operates effectively cannot thrive with an employee who constantly shirks responsibility. I decided to meet with the HR department and demand Karen's replacement. This was not only a sound decision but also a necessary step to ensure that the company wouldn't continue to be exploited by irresponsible individuals. At this point, the question was, would the company be willing to take strong action to protect the principle of fairness, or would it continue to allow this abuse to continue? After the meeting, HR officially invited Karen for a discussion about her situation. This should have been a reasonable step to resolve the issue transparently. However, instead of cooperating, Karen became furious and immediately threatened to sue the company. What's notable is that Karen had no legal grounds for this lawsuit. All the company's decisions adhered to clear policies, and Karen's abuse of the system was undeniable. However, what was shocking was that even though the threat was completely baseless, it had a significant impact on changing HR's attitude. Their stance suddenly shifted, from finding a reasonable solution to seeking ways to please Karen at all costs. Suddenly, HR's top priority was no longer ensuring work effectiveness but avoiding legal risks, despite having no solid basis for this fear. This exposed a serious weakness in HR management. When faced with an employee who failed to fulfill their responsibilities but was willing to use legal threats to get their way, the company should have stood firm and dealt with the situation fairly. Instead, they chose to concede out of fear. This fear, although lacking any strong legal foundation, led to an incredibly unfair decision. Not only did it undermine the credibility of the HR department, but it also caused deep damage to the work environment. When the company protects abusers instead of honest employees, it sends the wrong message: working hard doesn't matter, as long as you know how to manipulate the system. This was a distorted situation where those who truly contributed felt unfairly treated, while those exploiting the system were favored. If the company doesn't change its management approach, the question is, who will still be motivated to work seriously? The story began when I asked Karen to check the purchase orders, a task that was clearly her responsibility. It was a straightforward, reasonable task and nothing out of the ordinary compared to her daily work. However, her response was shocking. Not only did she refuse to perform the task, but Karen also immediately filed a complaint with HR, accusing me of ordering her inappropriately. This was completely unreasonable. I didn't ask Karen to work overtime, nor did I ask her to perform tasks outside of her responsibilities, nor did I use any form of coercion. So why did she turn a routine work request into a serious personal issue? Perhaps this was Karen's tactic. Instead of doing her job, she was exploiting the system to avoid responsibility. She knew that if she created a conflict and turned it into an HR issue, HR might side with her to avoid trouble. What's even more concerning is HR's reaction. Instead of objectively assessing the nature of the issue, they made an unreasonable decision. As the direct manager, I was no longer allowed to assign tasks to Karen. This was an unacceptable intervention. In any work environment, management is responsible for delegating tasks to ensure departmental performance. If an employee can arbitrarily refuse to do their work and use HR as a shield, what is the point of the company's management structure? This decision not only undermines the role of leadership but also sends the wrong message: if you don't want to work, just create a conflict, and you'll be protected. If the company continues to accept this kind of behavior, who will still want to comply with discipline and work seriously? When I requested to replace Karen with a new employee to ensure the work didn't suffer, HR bluntly refused to grant hiring authority. This put me in an incredibly difficult position, as an important role within the department remained vacant for months without a solution. The work was severely delayed. Without anyone to replace her, my team had to bear the additional workload, leading to increased pressure and declining morale. A number of orders were processed late, impacting both customers and the company's revenue. Karen quickly realized that she could easily manipulate the system. She knew that by making small complaints to HR, she could avoid work without facing any consequences. When I reminded her of her responsibilities, she accused me of pressuring her. When HR asked her to work regularly, she used health reasons, even though she had no valid proof. When she was at risk of being replaced, she threatened to sue the company, causing HR to hesitate. She succeeded. Karen not only enjoyed numerous privileges but also didn't take responsibility for her work. Even though she had fully recovered and hardly went to work, she still received her full salary. This raises a serious issue. The company's HR policy lacks control and transparency, allowing people like Karen to exploit the system. Hardworking employees are forced to bear the consequences of this injustice, leading to decreased work morale. Without changes, the company will become an environment where non-contributors are protected, and those who truly work are oppressed. One of the most frustrating events occurred at the end of the month when work was at a peak stage. Everyone had to focus intensely to ensure orders were processed on time, but once again, Karen failed to show up without prior notice. I was forced to call her, as the work couldn't wait. I simply wanted to confirm whether she planned to come to work so that I could make timely alternative arrangements. But instead of providing a reasonable answer, Karen reported to HR that I was harassing her just for a work-related call. The consequence? I was formally disciplined for pressuring an employee. This was an obvious injustice. As a manager, I have the responsibility to ensure the work runs smoothly, but in this situation, HR protected the person who wasn't working, instead of the one trying to maintain the company's operations. What's the greater consequence of this decision? Karen realized she could manipulate the HR system without facing any repercussions. If even a regular work call could be considered harassment, no one could remind her or ask her to complete tasks anymore. This unwarranted protection created a dangerous precedent. If Karen could easily make false accusations and still have the company side with her, other employees could follow suit. This would destroy fairness and accountability in the work environment. HR is no longer a department that protects common interests. It has become a tool for people like Karen to exploit. Those who genuinely work hard are left to endure the injustice with no recourse. At this point, the team's morale plummeted severely. My colleagues could clearly see the injustice, but they couldn't object because HR was siding with Karen. A working environment where non-contributors are protected while those who work seriously are oppressed, can this still be considered a professional company? Finally, after months of enduring injustice and lack of recognition, I decided to submit my resignation with a 2-week notice. It was a tough decision, but looking back, I couldn't continue working in an environment where a colleague like Karen could neglect their responsibilities without any consequences, while I had to dedicate 60 to 70 hours a week to ensure the work was completed on time. I felt disregarded and unrecognized, and this had a profound impact on my morale and motivation. My career could not continue to be ruined just because of a colleague who lacked responsibility. Choosing to leave was the only way I could protect myself and my career. Immediately after I left, the sales operations department fell into chaos due to the lack of a capable and committed manager. The purchase orders were not processed, and the company had to call on the senior vice president to intervene and resolve this emergency. This is clear proof that this department cannot function effectively without proper leadership and management, something I had always strived to maintain throughout my time there. In particular, the intervention of the vice president forced Karen to actually work, something she had not done before. This exposed Karen's severe lack of responsibility and highlighted the stark contrast between my work ethic and hers. While I always gave my best to maintain work efficiency and meet deadlines, Karen only worked when she was forced to do so. This not only clarified the injustice I had to endure but also emphasized the lack of professionalism and commitment in the work of a colleague, creating a clear divide in work attitudes within the same department. Although I left the company, the story didn't end there. Karen didn't stop and continued to try contacting me through my personal phone number. She seemed angry about having to actually work, which made the situation even more absurd when she reported me to HR, a department I no longer belonged to. This was not only unreasonable but also showed Karen's basic lack of understanding of company authority and procedures. It was hard to believe that she thought HR at my former company would accept complaints from someone no longer employed there. Her naivety and thoughtlessness made me laugh, and I decided to hang up and block her number. The situation became even more ironic when Karen called back and threatened me, demanding I provide contact details for the HR department at my new company so she could continue reporting me. This was a completely unreasonable and illegal act, as Karen had no right to demand or interfere with my work at my new company. This not only demonstrated a lack of awareness about her own authority but also a complete lack of respect for others. Finally, through old colleagues, I heard that Karen had been fired and received no unemployment benefits. Her unfortunate outcome was that she had to move back in with her mother and children, a result I believe she deserved for her irresponsible actions and abuse of the opportunities she had at the company. My story with Karen is not just a lesson about fairness and responsibility at work, but also a reminder that when we dedicate ourselves and work hard, it not only helps us grow but also contributes to the collective success of the team. However, when faced with irresponsibility and disorganized work attitudes, we must make firm decisions to protect ourselves and our careers, preventing negative behaviors from affecting our work in future. The greatest lesson from this story is, do not let injustice or abuse by others harm your career and mental well-being. When working in an environment lacking respect, you need to be decisive and clear-headed to act correctly and not be swept away by negativity. Dealing with such situations requires you to stand firm and protect your personal values to avoid getting lost in an unfair environment. Advice for those in similar environments. Uphold fairness and personal responsibility. Each individual must clearly understand their responsibilities and never allow the irresponsibility of others to affect their work and overall progress. Maintaining fairness and responsibility will help you preserve your career and personal stability. Make timely decisions. When the situation becomes unbearable, don't hesitate to make the necessary decisions, even if it means demanding change or even leaving an unhealthy work environment. Staying silent or procrastinating can lead to long-term negative consequences. Protect your own interests. Protecting your personal interests is not only a way to safeguard your career but also an act of self-respect in the workplace. Don't let anyone exploit you or make you feel unappreciated. Prevent and address issues promptly. When you notice signs of abuse or unfair behavior, intervene early and take preventative measures to avoid worsening the situation. Making the right decisions from the start will help protect your career and well-being. Standing firm and protecting your rights is the best way to thrive in a workplace. The important thing is always to define your career goals clearly and maintain self-respect when facing difficult situations. When you do the right thing, in the end, the values you bring will be recognized and appreciated.